Hello, Internet. This is Mia Nielsen, Director of Art Toronto. I am here today with Jayne Wilkinson, Editor-in-Chief of Canadian Art.
Hello.
Hello, Jayne. So, much like myself, you have been at Canadian Art Magazine for a year.
Yes, that's right. As editor-in-chief for a year, but I've actually been with the organization for just over 2 years. I was the managing editor there first. And yeah, I'm an editor and also an art writer. My background in the art world is a kind of mix of curatorial work, as well as editing and writing and kind of project organizing, I guess I would say. And yeah, I'm excited to be here in the middle of a, somewhat strange time. I'm in my new-ish office. I just moved and settling into the sort of strangenesses of working from home and working remotely as we all are right now.
Totally. And in this unprecedented time, we're all processing, managing a lot of uncertainty, a lot of bad news, a lot of darkness.
Mm-hmm.
And, as we all, kind of pivot our organizations and think about how our work supports culture and how we move forward, I think it's important to ask each other, what is the art world that we want to create?
Yeah, well, I mean, first, thank you for asking me to consider this question, because in thinking through the art world that we want to create, it's given me a moment to pause and to really think about what the opportunity that working this way, what those opportunities have meant. So one thing that I've really been reflecting on is just how much systems that we would think of as entrenched are shaking and are moving and are changing. And we are all changing and having to change the ways that we collaborate with each other, work with each other, socialize with each other, care for each other. All of our personal and day-to-day relationships, including our working relationships, are all shifting. Things that we thought would never change, things that I thought would never change in my lifetime, like governments are considering universal basic income. The price of oil is totally plummeting. No one is flying anywhere. The airline industry has totally ground to a halt. These things that seemed so sort of immovable are changing. And so I thank you for the opportunity to think through this question, because it is a moment where we can really consider a new kind of world. One of the things that I've been thinking about too is that artists and art is a kind of practice that considers world making. So artists themselves are constantly making kinds of worlds through their practices, right? They're sort of defining what a world looks like, what a practice looks like, what the boundaries of that practice might be. And I think that in a lot of my work, I try to follow the work of artists. I think often the answers are kind of already there. We sort of need to find ways to look for them. And I think in working with artists and writing about art and having conversations and learning more about process and research that artists and artworks go through, I think we can learn a lot about what it means to kind of try to think of rebuilding the world that we want right now. I don't think that there's going to be a kind of return to normal. I've been, having this conversation come up quite a bit lately. I think we're hearing a lot of people say that there is no return to normal, that there is kind of no going back. And I completely agree with that. I think that, normal wasn't really working for a lot of people. There were a lot of people that the system that we had did not serve. And that includes artists and people in the art world. And so I'm really interested in us thinking about, like, how do we go through this moment and how do we work through it in a way that, will produce a return to normal, that will produce some kind of routine world that is, more ethical, that is more supported, and that ultimately I think is more livable. So one of the things that I'd say to the sort of question around, like, what is the art world that I want us to create, or sort of what is the kind of vision that's possible, is one that's quite simply livable for artists, that allows artists the space that they need to create and to make work, and at every level. And the way that our cities are structured right now, or were previously structured, did not often allow for that. Rents are very expensive, studios are very expensive, and it's difficult for a lot of artists who are in, you know, in lots of cases kind of among the most sort of economically restricted. I think having a livable art world is, you know, a very aspirational goal, but I think as these kind of structures are reshifting and our world is kind of being restructured, there's an opportunity for us to really consider that. So I think that's sort of one of the first and foremost things. I think slowing down. I think the moment that we're in right now has required everyone to take a beat, take a minute, and slow down their pace of work for lots of different reasons. I really think that that's something that we need to learn from and remember, that the pace of work and the production that a sort of capitalist system requires is not always a human pace and a human scale. So that's something in terms of my own work and our work at Canadian Art that we've been really encouraging. So at the same time that we have to be responsive and we have to be present, I also want us to think about what it means to work in a way that is relational and intentional, and, you know, that prioritizes how we can collaborate with each other, rather than just thinking about what a product is or kind of what the end result is. And the opportunity to think about that and the opportunity to learn in that way, to kind of slow our day to day, is a rare one. So I'm conscious of trying to take note of that. I think we're finding different ways of understanding what it means to collaborate, and we're having to find different ways to communicate. So I'm also interested in taking what we've learned about digital communication and virtual communication, digital collaboration, and all of these different online platforms that we're using now to really find each other, and using that as using those tools going forward so that we can collaborate and can expand on what we're doing and what we're presenting at different scales. So, I mean, we have an opportunity, I think, and by we, I think I mean like artists and cultural producers in Canada, have an opportunity here to have our work shown kind of beyond how it would have been shown previously, because the sort of physical spaces of exhibition and the physical spaces of working are maybe not as well, they can't be as important right now because we can't access them, right? So we have to think about how we're going to show work. And I mean, this is a responsibility, I feel, Canadian Art as a publication and as a publishing platform online, to be able to disseminate the work of artists in Canada, and to be able to be a place where artists can have dialogue with each other and where kind of discourse around practices can happen. And I really feel that this moment is going to reshape how we're thinking about and using digital technologies very, very radically. I think we also at the same time have to be careful not to, assume that that's doing all the work for us. And I think we still need to be critical of digital tools, as we are of any sort of tools and technologies that we use. That it's not just sort of an answer. But I'm really excited by the possibilities of different kinds of collaborations that happen over distances that digital communication kind of makes possible now. We're seeing that a lot with, like reading groups popping up online, and the ways that artist talks are happening online now, and the kind of conversations that can happen on the side, the types of performances and the types of screenings that you can attend that, wouldn't have been able to otherwise. So that kind of, and that artists are generating kind of ideas for digital projects and for digital spaces and digital exhibitions outside of maybe the ways that they would have been thinking before. I think there's a lot of opportunity there for us to really be rethinking how we sort of connect and communicate with each other. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to lose the critical part. I think that we do have to be careful about how we use digital technology and who owns it and who controls it. And that's something that I don't want us to lose sight of in this moment where, digital communication and digital spaces are becoming so important and have so much more sort of weight on them.
No, that's so important. And you know, I really liked the point when where you were talking about how artists create new worlds, like that is you know, their primary you know, like bringing different visions to life. And I'm curious, like how you know, through, you know, Canadian art as a publication, through an art fair, like how do we support those visions, and how do we bring those ideas and visions, if you will, to the widest audiences possible?
Well, one of the things that I think is really important with Canadian art is that the writing and the kind of presentation of artists' work has to be accessible. And that doesn't mean that it's not rigorous and, you know, intelligent and well-grounded, but it does need to be able to reach an audience. And I think that there's so much incredible work that goes into researching, and whether that's material research or academic research or different kinds of like artistic research. There's so much that goes into those practices, and I've always felt very fortunate to be working in this field, because you have studio visits or you visit galleries with artists, and I feel very lucky to be able to have conversations where I can hear more about how an artist is thinking about an exhibition or a project, or even just like seeing something in a certain way. And I think that you know, our job as a publication is to be able to parse those stories, is to be able to develop and, if not explain, but certainly contextualize those kinds of practices and those kinds of works, and you know, put that in like a bigger kind of field of culture. One of the things that's amazing about working in this way is that you learn so much about many different fields, because artists are working all the time with all sorts of different fields of knowledge and different fields of inquiry. And I think I see it as our job to make those conversations and those ideas and those concepts that are being realized in material form, for us to be able to sort of tell stories and tell narratives about them, to put them into context and to think about them really critically and rigorously, but in a way that also makes ideas accessible to a broader audience. And I think particularly right now, when people are sheltering in place, are home, are kind of physically distanced from each other, and are looking for ways to engage, I think it's more important now than ever that we have that as a kind of grounding sort of principle. And I think it's really it's up to arts media to be able to do that work in a way that makes sense. So I think that that's sort of one. I think that that's kind of one part of it. And I also think that in terms of this kind of idea about like art as a world-making possibility, it's really, part of that is about valuing and prioritizing people and relationships. And part of that kind of work of world building is about a collaborative practice, or a collaborative process. And I think that that's something I've become very aware of as we're all sort of apart from each other. How do we find ways to connect with each other and to generate ideas and to have those kinds of casual conversations that can happen in public that are happening differently now? And so being able to learn how to do that in new ways is going to produce all sorts of new ideas, I think, down the road. I think it's about being able to be comfortable with a kind of level of uncertainty about the world that is to come, and recognizing that we're in it now, and how the decisions that we make and the ways that we, you know, continue to work is going to have long-lasting impacts. So if we, you know, the ways that we treat each other and the ways that we continue to work now are the ways that are the worlds that we are going to inherit. So we should take care of each other.
Beautiful.
Got a little like, I mean,
that's fantastic. I feel like we could have this conversation all day, but that was I just loved how you kind of wrapped that up. I think
I think I also missed like that kind of in person sort of idea exchange. So we do need to figure out how to do that online, because it's not as straightforward as it once was.
I totally agree. I think that, one of the challenges in media, the way I see it, um, is enabling this dialogue, that this meaningful dialogue, like, it's not like, leaving an anonymous comment, which, they're sometimes hateful and horrible, but like how do we maintain this kind of magic, this of spontaneity, and um investigating ideas in genuine ways.
Yeah, I think it's a balance of being able to be responsive to a moment, of course, but also to be able to have a kind of longer view and be able to have a bigger picture, and kind of be able to keep both of those things in tandem. And I mean, I think for us, one of the big questions that we've been grappling with over the last couple of weeks and months is like, how is the coronavirus affecting the art world? How is it affecting artists and gallerists and institutions in Canada, of course, but also how can we continue to think about what art does, what culture does, what the sort of function of the art world is, where this is part of it, but this is not the only thing. There are still aspects of life that have to continue. We have to continue to take care of ourselves, take care of each other, and continue working. And I think that one of the struggles for, but also kind of one of the opportunities for a publication like Canadian Art is to be able to have that balance between the work that we do for artists and the ways that we're responding to kind of the current climate. And I'm conscious that there's a bit of fatigue that happens too around crisis news. I certainly am feeling it. And I think that, that you have to sort of be able to have a bit of a balance between them, and working at different scales. Is important to that.
Yeah, it's true. The different scales, I think, are really important, because it's like when you come back to working on the immediate, to me, like it kind of it can put some of that longer view into perspective. And then when you go back to the longer view, it puts the immediate into perspective. And like, having, like, finding a new rhythm where we give ourselves the space to think about where we can take culture, how we can share it with these wide audiences, and how we can use it to build more dynamic, just loving, supportive, forward-thinking societies. But then and then working on the day-to-day, like the little steps.
Yeah, and one of the other reasons that I was thinking about this kind of question of scale too, and maybe to say this before we wrap up, is that the COVID-19 crisis has thrown everything into relief, and I think that there's a tendency to say it's exposing the fault lines, it's exposing the cracks. Yes, that is absolutely true, but I think one of the things that we really need to take stock of is like, well, okay, so what? I mean, so what are we going to do? We can't go back to a world that has, perpetuated so much racial injustice, environmental injustice. I think the problems of the world as it exists are certainly being exposed. So what do we do? And I think if we can use this opportunity to think about big picture, think about global issues, and be able to respond to them in real time on a smaller scale, like, we have the opportunity to do that right now, because we have to work kind of independently and individually, and be connected to a global network. So I'm really conscious of that kind of aspect of the ways that we're trying to work. And I think ultimately, publishing and publications have a really important role in shaping the conversations and shaping the discourse. And so I hope that, I hope that through this, that will be something that really kind of persists. And, I will say publishing at any time is a precarious endeavor, and particularly, in Canada, where we're small and distributed geographically. But I've been really heartened by a lot of our colleagues in the various art publications across the country. I think people are really stepping up, and some really excellent work has been happening. So I hope that, yeah, that will continue, and that, you know, finding new ways of sort of digital collaboration and digital communications will help, will only, you know, can only add.
Totally. That's awesome. Jayne, thank you so much. This has been like such an inspiring conversation.
Yeah, well, thank you, Mia. Thanks for the invitation. It was great to speak with you.
Awesome. All right. Thanks.
Bye. Thank you. Bye. Ciao.